Good morning and welcome to this morning's reflection. I've recently been speaking about St. John of the Cross, and I'd like to just dig a little deeper into some of his teachings. In his work, The Dark Night of the Soul, St. John of the Cross paints an honest picture of the spiritual journey. It is not an easy journey, but it is really a process of purification. And he speaks about 5, what he refers to as capital sins. Now don't run away because I've used the word sin. Sin is really when we place ourselves on the throne rather than placing God as the center of our lives. And so what are these 5 ways in which we build our kingdom on earth instead of God's? And these 5 capital sins cling even to those who pray, who serve, and who seek God honestly. These are not the obvious sins of the world. They are rather spiritual attachments, born from the same roots as all other attempts to establish our kingdom on earth. But they are dressed up here in religious clothing. And they remind us that holiness is not found in activity or achievement, but in the surrender of self. And the first of these is spiritual pride. Pride is the first and most dangerous of the 5. And even the most committed of Christians can fall into taking secret satisfaction in their virtue, in the things that they do right, in the amount that they pray, in their knowledge. And we begin to measure our devotedness. We begin to measure our love of God by comparing ourselves with others and thinking that we are already so far advanced along this journey of spiritual growth. But pride blinds us to grace. It makes us the center instead of God, hence it is a sin. John writes that God gently humbles the soul through the dark night, removing consolation so that we depend not on feelings or achievements, but we depend on faith alone. True humility is to know that everything good in us is God's work, and to let go of the need to be seen as holy. The cure for spiritual pride is humility and self-forgetfulness, to walk quietly with God, aware of our need for mercy. The second is spiritual avarice or spiritual greed. This is not the greed of money, but of spiritual experiences. The soul becomes attached to the delight of prayer, to the sweetness of prayer, becomes attached to spiritual success. And we want more grace, more light, more of those deep feelings of God, not realizing we are seeking the gifts and not the giver. And so St. John warns that this attachment blocks true union with God. It blocks our intimacy with God because it's not about God, it's about us. And God may withdraw consolations from us, withdraw those feelings of delight and wonder and awe and a sense of His closeness, so that we love Him for His sake, not for the sake of what we get from Him, that we love Him more purely, not for how He makes us feel, but for who He is. The remedy here is detachment and gratitude, to accept dryness in prayer as part of love's maturing. God leads us into darkness, not to abandon us, but to free us from loving the light more than the one who gives it. The third is spiritual lust. And John describes this as the misuse of spiritual delight. The soul seeks emotional or sensual pleasure in prayer or religious devotion, the thrill of the sacred, rather than the love of God. It's a subtle form of self-seeking where devotion becomes about how it makes me feel. He calls this spiritual gluttony or spiritual lust. Both point to the same attachment to pleasure in spiritual life. The cure is purity of intention, to pray not for feelings, but for union with God's will. When love matures, it becomes quiet, deep, and self-giving. Not always emotionally intense, but always faithful. And the fourth is spiritual envy. Even the most devout people can feel envy when they see others receiving blessings or graces that they lack. We might compare our progress, our ministry, and our intimacy with God with others. And this envy then reveals hidden insecurity, a desire to be loved more or to be seen as special. And John's remedy is love and rejoicing in others, in the good of others, delighting in others. In heaven's economy, another's holiness adds to our joy. Another's success adds to our joy. Grace is not competitive. The more we love, the more we share in each other's light. When you rejoice in another's gifts, they become yours as well. And finally, John speaks of spiritual sloth. Not laziness in work, but weariness of soul when prayer becomes dry or demanding. And the soul begins to resist the quiet disciplines of love. We crave stimulation and consolation, and when they are gone, we lose heart. But God uses dryness to purify love. Real growth happens when we pray without pleasure, serve without reward, and love without return. That is the love of the cross. The remedy is perseverance and trust to keep loving in the dark. That is the mark of a soul being transformed by grace. St. John of the Cross teaches that God leads the soul through the dark night precisely to heal us from these 5 capital sins. The night feels like loss, but in truth it is love's purification. Pride becomes humility. Greed becomes detachment. Lust becomes pure desire. Envy becomes rejoicing. And sloth becomes faithful endurance. The soul that passes through this darkness emerges radiant, free from self, alive in God, and capable of the purest love. John wrote, "The soul that passes through the dark night walks in the light of God's love, freed from all that is not God." The dark night, then, is not punishment, it is grace. It is the fire that refines, the silence that teaches, the emptiness that fills. And when we let God lead us through it, we come to the dawn. Not as we were, but transformed into the likeness of Christ Himself.